Hello again, and welcome to another insightful interview with GTSC's Homeland Security Today. My name is Kristina Tanasichuk. I'm the executive editor of HS Today, and I'm very excited to be talking with Tina Won Sherman, the Director of Homeland Security and Justice at the U.S. Government Accounting Office, fondly known as GAO, at least fondly by me, because I just love you guys. Welcome, Tina.
Thank you so much for having me, Christina. Glad to be here to speak with you today.
Us too. Since my time on the Hill, I have always so respected GAO's work, and you really do a tremendous service because I feel like once you read a GAO report, you know everything that's happening on that topic. You do such a thorough and tremendous job, and kudos to you on this report. Today, we're going to be talking about a report they recently released on the Coast Guard about efforts needed to address some of the cybersecurity risks to the maritime transportation system. So first, I guess what I'd like to ask you, Tina, is a little bit about GAO and tell us about you and the process by which you do these reports.
Sure. GAO, the U.S. Government Accountability Office, is a investigative arm of Congress. So we are nonpartisan, objective, fact-based as an agency. And what we do is we look across the federal government at any program or activity that receives federal funding. And we look to see whether or not, for example, it's spending its money as required by law, whether or not it's meeting certain performance measures to ensure the effectiveness and efficiency of that money and how the program or activity is being carried out. And we have a number of other activities that we also conduct as well.
That's amazing. And you are such a tremendous resource. Like I said, once you read your report, you understand the history and the context. I think that's very, very important for people who are trying to understand what's happening in government. And certainly with the big push about waste, fraud, and abuse, I think GAO is a great place to look to find out, the work we've already done. Where is the waste, fraud, and abuse? Like you all have documented it, and frankly, where it's not waste, fraud, and abuse. So really appreciate your work. One of the things, of course, that's facing every industry is cybersecurity. It is so pervasive and things are becoming so interconnected, it's more and more difficult. So what did you find are the primary cybersecurity threats facing the maritime industry, facilities and vessels?
Yeah, as you noted, Christina, cybersecurity is an issue across a number of industries and sectors. So the maritime transportation system is really no different than any of the cybersecurity risks that are faced by the 16 critical infrastructure sectors, which include communications, energy, agriculture, and transportation, and that's where maritime sits. And so, in thinking about what the various risks are or threats to the system, to start off with, there are nation states and transnational criminal organizations that are essentially threat actors that are looking for a variety of reasons to infiltrate the cybersecurity of maritime vessels and facilities. There are also hacktivists and insiders, so insider threats that also exist. Then, if you think about beyond actors, thinking about technology, because across all the critical infrastructure sectors, we use information technology to be able to communicate, to be able to share information, and the maritime transportation system relies on information technology to do just that, to be able to communicate and share information, say, for example, from facilities over to vessels, so a port trying to communicate to a ship or between ships. And there are opportunities there for those technologies to be somehow impacted or infiltrated, as well as operational technology, which is used to help control or conduct or monitor some of the systems that are embedded into, again, those vessels or facilities in that maritime space. So one of the ones that has come up more frequently in the news is around ship-to-shore cranes that are used to help load and unload vessel cargo at ports.
So this report in particularly, it addresses the Coast Guard. Can you speak a little bit to the Coast Guard's role in that security and then some of the challenges they're having in their role?
Yeah, so the Coast Guard is responsible for the oversight of ports, facilities, and vessels under this regulatory framework guided by a law from 2002. It's called the Maritime Transportation Security Act. So any Maritime Transportation Security Act regulated facility or vessel, and there, for example, are several hundred ports that fall under that particular umbrella, would be subject to regulation and oversight by the Coast Guard. But in 2002, when that law was passed, cybersecurity wasn't even referenced in the language at all. It was certainly a thing, but not hasn't evolved or hadn't evolved at that time as the way has now in terms of its significance, prevalence, and impact. So there were actually no specific cybersecurity requirements or regulations built into that initial law. A few years back in 2018, the law was amended in order to incorporate some cybersecurity requirements for owners and operators of those facilities and vessels to be able to identify or to assess and address cybersecurity risks. And this is something that the Coast Guard now includes in its inspections that it conducts on a regular basis of facilities and of vessels. However, those requirements actually, as part of that law, were not implemented through any type of a regulation until actually last month. So it took until January 2025 for the Coast Guard to issue or promulgate regulations for cybersecurity within the Maritime Transportation System. And those specific regulations, as of last month, will not be implemented until the summer. So there's still a lot of activity going on and work for the Coast Guard to be able to now use that regulatory, those sets of regulatory guidance and requirements to be able to inspect even more of the cybersecurity activities that are occurring by owners and operators at the facilities and vessels.
So really, they didn't have a framework for people to even help them, essentially help them collect the data and
Yeah, I mean, they did. There were some requirements, but they were minimal, and in a lot of cases, the cybersecurity requirements were limited in terms of the scope. And so there's voluntary actions, of course, that owners and operators have been taking, but it had been pretty limited, and that's why this this recent regulation is so impactful, or can be so impactful.
Excellent. And so after reviewing the process, can you talk a little bit about what recommendations you did come up with? I mean, I think you had 5 recommendations for the Coast Guard. And what can you summarize those quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. So our review took a look at a number of different issues, and we found recommendations. We found deficiencies in all of those areas. There's actually 4 specifically. One, we were taking a look at, for example, cybersecurity incidents and the Coast Guard's ability to accurately record those incidents. We found that they were not accurately doing so. Sometimes there were physical security incidents that were recorded. Sometimes there were non-incidents that were recorded. So we asked for improved procedures to ensure the accuracy of those incidents. The second was around the information or deficiencies that are collected tied to cybersecurity as part of the inspections that are being carried out that I was mentioning just a little while ago at facilities and vessels. The system that was designed, the case management system to collect that information, did not previously and does not currently catalog cybersecurity deficiencies in a way that it does for other deficiencies as part of the inspection process, because it relies on what had been in that Maritime Transportation Security Act, that law from 2002, and had been limitedly updated to identify or address other requirements or regulations, including cybersecurity, because there were no specific regulations in place, as I had mentioned, until last month. So the information that's included in those systems was being entered by inspectors on an inconsistent basis. They're using different search phrases that are challenging to search because you kind of have to come up with a litany of potential search terms. And so it's not really reliable. We also took a look at the strategy for cybersecurity that the Coast Guard has and found that it is missing full implementation of some of the key characteristics of an effective national strategy. There are 5, and they deal with roles and responsibilities, resources, goals, purpose, and the strategy the Coast Guard has only included 1 in terms of full implementation of those characteristics. So we've asked the Coast Guard to fully implement the other 4. And then we had finally 2 recommendations around competencies for the cybersecurity workforce at the Coast Guard. There are no specific cybersecurity competency requirements for its cybersecurity personnel. And so we asked the Coast Guard to develop those requirements tied to the risks that are identified that we talked a little bit about, foreign threats to the maritime transportation system. And then we also asked the Coast Guard to essentially conduct a gap analysis and identify where those competencies, as they're developing the requirements and working to make them more robust for various positions, to be able to identify and implement and make sure that those specific requirements are going to be tied to addressing the risks to the system. So we had those 5, again, as I'd mentioned, that are kind of pretty comprehensive in the cybersecurity space.
Absolutely. And you kind of touch on everything. And frankly, many of the challenges that people in the private sector have, having qualified cyber people, all of that is faced by both sides. So if you were thinking about this report, what should industry leaders and particularly cybersecurity professionals take away from what you found?
Yeah, so the first thing I think for industry and those professionals really is the Coast Guard's making progress, and there's significant opportunity for the Coast Guard not only to provide more oversight that is needed within the system to ensure improved cybersecurity, but also to be able to provide better resources, better assistance to owners and operators in the private sector. As I think Kristina, across critical infrastructure, a majority of that infrastructure, including in the maritime transportation system, is owned by the private sector. And so that partnership, that shared partnership between the federal government and the private sector is so critical. And so industry also needs to continue what it has been doing, investing resources, both in terms of personnel, money, time to help improve the cybersecurity of its, in this case, vessels and facilities, and also really to continue to partner with the federal government, with the Coast Guard, because whatever is done on the side of the private sector to improve cybersecurity is going to improve cybersecurity through the entire system. And the same goes with the federal side as well.
Absolutely. I'm a former InfraGard president. And so we certainly understand the presidential directive, but you are so spot on by saying that partnership is critical. Everybody likes to bandy about how much of the critical infrastructure is owned by the private sector, but that does present a significant challenge. You can't use a top-down approach and just order people around. You must have that buy-in, and you must, provide good information sharing. And so I know the nation's still working on that, but we've made a lot of strides. And I know that the infrastructure sectors are doing a tremendous job of connecting everyone together and making sure that we're developing and kind of shoring up that partnership. So that's a great recommendation. I'm so glad to hear it. Well, I want everyone to read the report, so she's not going to tell you anymore. You have to go read it for yourselves, or at least read their absolutely tremendous 1-page summary, because that really puts everything in perspective. Thank you for being a partner for better government. I think anyone who reads and listens to your recommendations certainly makes our federal government stronger. And so we appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, Kristina. It was great to be here to talk about our work. I appreciate
Absolutely. And we will provide the link to the report, and Homeland Security Today did summarize it, even though, as I said, that one-page summary that they do pretty much gives you a very, very good snapshot of the report. So thank you again, and we hope to be talking to you on a regular basis. So appreciate your work.